London had always been loud in the summer. Riverboats humming down the Thames, tourists feeding the pigeons in Trafalgar Square, the underground groaning beneath the weight of another humid afternoon. But on the 8th of July, 3 months after the last nuclear detonation smoldered out across the Atlantic, the city became quiet in a way no one could explain. It began at exactly noon. A single note, long, metallic, and resonant, rolled across the sky like a massive trumpet blast, blown by an unseen colossus. Windows rattled, clouds twisted into spirals, birds froze mid-flight as if stunned by the vibration. People spilled out into the streets, staring upward, searching for planes or speakers or anything that could produce such a sound. But there was nothing. Just the wide blue sky of an unnaturally hot summer, smeared by faint streaks of radiation haze drifting from distant continents. London had survived the war. If survival meant power rationing, strict curfews, food queues, and a permanent fear that the next flash on the horizon might end everything. Still, the city went on. People tried to rebuild their routines. They tried to pretend the world hadn't changed. Yet the sound proved otherwise. It made the air thrum like the strings of a giant harp. Children began to cry. Old men covered their ears. Conversations died on every street. And then the note stopped. Silence followed, deep and absolute, like the breath the world takes before saying something important. At the center of Westminster Bridge, 29-year-old historian Eliza Marbridge leaned against the railing, staring at the sky in disbelief. She had been walking to the National Archives to continue her research on pre-war foreign policy. Now her notebook lay forgotten at her feet. She kept replaying the noise in her mind, its weight, its eeriness, its almost musical depth. "It can't be natural," she whispered. A voice beside her said, "It wasn't." Eliza turned. An elderly man with soot-streaked spectacles and a long gray coat stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was wrinkled but sharp, the kind that looked carved rather than aged. "You heard it too?" she asked. The man nodded slowly. "Everyone heard it. Some have heard it before." Eliza blinked. "Before? When?" "When the sixth trump sounded," he replied, as if that made sense. She frowned. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "What trump?" He looked at her with a calm that bordered on unsettling. "7 warnings before the world resets. 6 have already come. Today was the 7th trump." Eliza gave a nervous laugh. "You're talking about prophecy? Sirens? Nuclear alarms?" "Not alarms." The old man leaned in closer. "Signals." She stepped back. Something in his voice, steady, certain, made her uneasy. "Signals from who? Governments? Military alliances? Satellites malfunctioning because of radiation?" He shook his head. "No. Signals from the world itself." Eliza didn't know whether to cut the conversation short or keep listening. It was the tone, quiet, almost sorrowful, that kept her rooted to the spot. The old man looked out across the river, where the sunlight shimmered like molten glass. "The 7th trump marks the final correction." "Correction of what?" He sighed. "Of a mistake humanity has refused to learn from." Before she could respond, a shout echoed down the bridge. People were pointing upward again, toward a spiral of light forming above the Houses of Parliament. Not lightning, not smoke. Something that looked like a twisting ribbon of gold, flickering like the air above a fire. Eliza felt the hairs rise on her arms. "What is that?" someone yelled. The old man didn't even look up. "The next part." The golden spiral expanded, shimmering across the sky in widening coils. People gasped, stumbled back, pulled out phones that barely worked on reduced post-war networks. A low vibration pulsed through the bridge's iron frame. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the spiral collapsed inward, flashing once, leaving behind a faint ring of light suspended in the sky like a glowing halo. The old man turned and began walking away, his coat trailing behind him. "Wait," Eliza called, running after him. "Who are you? How do you know about this?" He paused, looked back over his shoulder, and said, "My name is Osric Vale. I study endings." Then he vanished into the crowd. Eliza stood frozen, heart hammering, staring at the fading ring of light. She didn't know it yet, but the real meaning of the seventh trump had only just begun to reveal itself, and the consequences would reach far beyond the summer streets of London. Eliza didn't sleep that night. The strange golden ring still hovered in the sky, like a burn mark on reality, faint but undeniable. Londoners tried to behave normally, lining up for rationed bread, listening to the Ministry of Reconstruction's broadcasts, exchanging rumors at the market stalls, but every conversation circled back to the same questions. What was the sound? What was the spiral? And why did it feel like a warning? By sunrise, the heat had grown even heavier. It was the kind of unnatural warmth that had persisted since the nuclear exchange months earlier. Scientists blamed atmospheric instability, but people whispered about omens. The sky glowed a hazy orange, even before dawn. Eliza stepped outside her small flat in Southwark, clutching her notebook tightly. She hadn't intended to seek out the old man she'd met on Westminster Bridge, yet her feet kept drawing her in that direction. Something in his voice, the calm certainty, the unsettling knowledge, wouldn't leave her mind. Osric Vale. A name like something out of an old manuscript. A name that didn't fit this fragile new world. She found herself wandering into the National Archives anyway, more out of habit than intention. The building survived the near-miss strike that had destroyed several blocks nearby, but cracks now snaked across the stone facade. Inside, the air smelled of dust, old paper, and faint chemical residue from decontamination efforts. As she walked past the rows of historical documents, she couldn't help replaying Osric's words. 7 warnings before the world resets. 6 have already come. What were the 6? Nuclear detonations? Environmental disasters? Political collapses? She needed answers. Not superstition, not fear-driven rumors, but facts. She approached Margaret Reeves, a seasoned archivist with silver hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on her forehead. "Morning, Eliza," Margaret said. "You look pale. You heard the sound yesterday, right?" Margaret nodded slowly. Hard to ignore a sky trumpet." Eliza swallowed. "Do we have any historical references to similar events? Reports, diaries, old legends?" "You mean prophetic trumpets?" Margaret chuckled nervously. "We have thousands. Every century comes with its doomsday prophets. But have any been recorded after nuclear events?" Margaret's expression shifted. "Ah, that's different." She led Eliza to a restricted section, documents rescued from a government research institute that no longer existed. Many had scorch marks along the edges. "These files," Margaret said, "come from the Pre-Impact Irregular Phenomena Task Force. A mouthful, I know. The department specialized in unusual correlations, atmospheric anomalies, auditory events during crises." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "You mean they studied strange sounds?" "Among other things." Margaret handed her a file thick with yellowed pages. Eliza opened it carefully. Inside were witness reports dating back decades, strange noises before earthquakes, mysterious hums during solar storms, inexplicable resonant tones during wartime detonations. Then she froze at a page titled "The Sixth Trump Event, Northern Hemisphere, 1986. Her pulse quickened. Below the title was a description eerily similar to yesterday's blast of sound. A long, metallic tone, a spiral of light. Witnesses describing a halo forming in the sky. "Why haven't I ever heard of this?" Eliza asked. "Classified until 2 months ago, when the government started declassifying everything they could to rebuild trust." Eliza flipped further. There were 5 more documents labeled Trump events, each linked to a period of global upheaval. 5, then 6. And now the 7th? She felt a shiver crawl up her spine. Before she could ask more, a man in a dark blue coat hurried into the archive room. His face was flushed, and he looked as though he'd run the entire way. "Is there an Eliza Marbridge here?" he asked, breathless. Eliza stepped forward. Yes. He handed her a sealed envelope, thick, aged, and stamped with a wax seal she hadn't seen before. The emblem depicted a circle crossed by 7 rays. She looked up sharply. Where did you get this? From a man at the gate, the courier replied. Said it was time for you to read it. Eliza's heart stuttered. There was only one person it could be. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, handwritten, precise, old-fashioned. It read, Eliza Marbridge. If you wish to understand the 7th trump, meet me at the ruins of St. Dunstan in the east at dusk. Bring no one. Osric Vale. Margaret leaned in. You know this person? Eliza whispered. I met him yesterday. He said he studies endings. Margaret's face paled. Eliza, St. Dunstan in the east is dangerous at dusk. Unstable structures, patrols, looters. I know, Eliza said, folding the letter. But I need answers. The archivist grabbed her arm gently. Be careful. People who talk about endings rarely mean anything simple. Eliza nodded. She knew Margaret was right, but curiosity, and something deeper she couldn't name, pulled her forward. As she left the building, the faint golden halo still hovered above Parliament. It felt like a countdown only Osric Vale understood. Dusk came late that summer, lingering over London like a smoldering ember. The air pressed down in thick waves of heat, and even the shadows felt warm. Eliza moved carefully through the narrow streets east of the river, her footsteps echoing against shattered cobblestones. Most of this district had been evacuated months earlier, after tremors from the distant detonations weakened the old buildings. St. Dunstan in the east rose ahead of her like the skeleton of a forgotten cathedral. Ivy crawled up its blackened stone walls, weaving through empty window frames. The church had survived the Great Fire, the Blitz, and the passing of centuries. But the new world, this post-nuclear summer, had cracked even its stubborn foundation. Eliza stepped through a broken archway and into the open courtyard. Wind whispered through the ruins, carrying with it a faint metallic hum, almost like the echo of yesterday's sky trumpet. The remaining tower cast long shadows across the ground, slicing through the fading sunlight. Osric, Eliza called softly. Her voice dissolved into the warm evening air. For a moment, she wondered if she had been tricked, or worse, lured into some sort of trap. The city was still unstable. Desperate people sometimes roamed abandoned areas, searching for supplies or scraps to trade. She tightened her grip on her notebook. A figure emerged from behind a fallen column. Osric Vale looked exactly as he had on the bridge, calm, composed, as though he belonged to an era less chaotic than this one. You came, he said. You sent for me, she replied, and I have questions. I expected you would. He walked to the center of the courtyard, where a circular stone platform lay half buried beneath ash and ivy. He gestured for her to join him. Above them, the faint golden halo still glowed in the sky, unmoved since the moment it appeared. What is that? Eliza asked, pointing upward. The halo. It hasn't faded. Osric tilted his head. It won't. Not until the process is complete. Process of what? He looked at her with sorrowful patience. Of the world resetting. Eliza felt frustration rising. You keep speaking in riddles. I need clarity. And I will give it, Osric said. But understand, clarity is not always comfort. He placed a hand on the stone platform. Tell me, Eliza said, what were the first 6 Trump events? Osric's eyes glimmered with the reflection of the halo. The world has been warned for over a century. 6 great pulses before the 7th. Each occurred at a moment humanity crossed a threshold of irreversible damage. He tapped the stone lightly. The first trump sounded during the global famine of 1920. Few heard it. Fewer understood it. His voice deepened. The second during the first nuclear test. The third at the height of the Cold War standoff. The fourth before the ozone collapse. The fifth during the oceanic die-off. The sixth in 1986, as you discovered. Eliza felt her breath catch. He had known she would find the documents. And the seventh? She whispered. Osric looked directly at her, his gaze heavy with something that felt like resignation. The seventh trump only sounds when the world reaches its breaking point, when the damage done can no longer be reversed by human effort alone. Eliza's pulse quickened. You mean the nuclear war? Not just the war. Osric's voice softened. Every collapse leading to it, every choice, every silence. The war was only the culmination. Eliza's eyes narrowed. So the trumpet is a punishment? No, he said gently. A mechanism. She stared at him, bewildered. What kind of mechanism? The earth, Osric said, placing his palm flat on the stone, is not as passive as you think. It has its own systems of correction. When pushed to the brink, it reacts. Eliza rubbed her temples. Osric, you make it sound like the planet is alive. It is not alive in the way we are, he answered. But it has its own logic, its own boundaries, and now it has initiated the final correction. Eliza stepped back, shaking her head. This is madness. You're talking like a mystic. Osric's expression didn't change. And yet the sky trumpet sounded. The halo formed. Events follow patterns, Eliza. They always have. She turned away, letting frustration and fear surge through her. The ruins felt suddenly claustrophobic, the shadows too deep. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Osric hesitated. You will not like the answer. Tell me. The correction begins with memory. Eliza stiffened. Memory? Osric stepped closer. The world resets by erasing what brought it to ruin. Human memory, collective, historical, and personal, will begin to unravel. People will forget the war, then the decades before it, then everything leading to the first trumpet. The reset undoes the path of destruction. Eliza's heart pounded. That's impossible. Osric looked at her with a sadness she did not understand. It has already begun. A distant cry echoed through the ruins. Eliza turned sharply. Outside the courtyard, a woman wandered the street, clutching her head, murmuring to herself, My name! I can't remember my name. Eliza felt ice run through her veins. Osric placed a hand on her shoulder. You see? The seventh trump has already spoken. She looked up at him, fear tightening around her chest. Why tell me this? She demanded. Why me? Osric stepped back, his silhouette framed by the dimming halo. Because you, he said quietly, are the one the world cannot afford to forget. Eliza felt the world tilt under her feet. The woman's frantic voice still echoed through the ruins, carrying a hollow desperation that chilled the warm evening air. I can't remember my name. Osric's words pressed down on her like a weight. The correction begins with memory. She took a step back from him, heart pounding against her ribs. This can't be real. People don't just forget like that. Osric folded his hands behind his back. Not naturally. But this is not a natural summer. A warm wind swept through the ruins, sending dust swirling around their feet. Eliza tried to steady her breathing. You're telling me the world is erasing itself? That we're all going to forget everything? Our lives, our history, our mistakes? Osric nodded slowly. The reset removes the path that led to destruction. If humanity forgets the ruin, it cannot repeat it. That makes no sense, she snapped. If people forget the war, wouldn't that make us more likely to repeat it? Not if the world itself resets the conditions, Osric replied softly. Memory, environment, technology, everything returns to a point before the damage became irreversible. Eliza stared at him. You're describing time travel. No. Osric touched the stone platform again. This is not a return. It is a recreation, a reassembling of the world from surviving fragments. Eliza swallowed hard. And what does that mean for us? For the people already living? Osric hesitated, just long enough for her stomach to drop. Some will remain. Some will fade. Some will become something else. Why tell me all this? She whispered. Why am I different? Osric looked up at the halo. still glowing faintly through the rising haze. Because the reset requires an anchor. An anchor? A single mind that remembers, he said. Someone to carry forward enough truth to guide the next age without destroying it. Eliza's throat tightened. You think that's me? I do not think, Osric corrected. I know. Before she could speak again, a distant rumble shook the ground. She spun toward the sound, another sky trumpet, another anomaly. But no, this vibration was different, deeper, rhythmic. Voices began rising in the streets beyond the ruins. What's happening? Eliza murmured. Osric stepped toward the archway. The unraveling is advancing faster than I expected. They hurried outside. The sky over London shimmered like a heat mirage. Buildings seemed to blur at the edges, sharp outlines softening as if memory itself was slipping. Street signs flickered between languages. Lamp posts bent in the haze, straightened, then bent again. People filled the street, alarmed and confused. A man pointed at Big Ben. The clock! It's wrong. It's always been, no, wait, what time is it? What's the time supposed to be? A woman clutched her husband's arm. Where are we going? We were heading somewhere, weren't we? A child sobbed. I forgot my birthday. Did I have one? Eliza felt her pulse race. Osric, this is chaos. We need to get help. Find the ministry. They will not remember, Osric said quietly. No government can fight the unraveling. Their policies, their data, their very purpose will fade. Eliza grabbed his arm. Then what can we do? Osric turned to her, composed, but with something new in his eyes. Regret. We must reach the observatory. The Royal Observatory? She asked. Yes. Greenwich lies along the prime meridian, one of the world's few natural memory anchors. The reset begins there. Eliza frowned. Why would the Earth need landmarks? Because memory needs reference, Osric replied. Without them, everything dissolves. The ground trembled again, stronger this time. Far off, the golden halo pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Osric began moving quickly through the crowd. Eliza followed, weaving between panicked citizens. People shouted, prayed, clung to strangers, grasping for anything familiar. As they reached London Bridge, Eliza felt a sharp tug inside her mind, as though a memory had just snapped loose. She gasped, gripping the railing. What was that? She whispered. Your mind felt the pull of the reset, Osric said. You resisted. That is good. But I lost something, she said, breath shaking. I don't know what, but I felt it go. You will lose more before we are done, Osric said. Everyone will. But you must hold to the core of yourself. They crossed the bridge and hurried toward Greenwich, where the first stars were beginning to pierce the haze. As they climbed the hill toward the observatory, Eliza felt an odd sensation, a pull, almost magnetic, drawing her forward. The golden halo overhead brightened, stretching eastward like a guiding arc. Osric halted suddenly. At the top of the hill, silhouetted against the shimmering sky, stood three figures, their outlines blurred, shifting like heat haze. They seemed neither entirely physical nor entirely light. Eliza froze. Who are they? Osric exhaled slowly. They are the heralds of the reset, he said. And they are waiting for you. Eliza's hands trembled. For me? Osric nodded. The world cannot reset without its anchor, and they have come to decide whether you are worthy. The figures raised their heads toward her, glowing brighter as the sky hummed with power. Eliza felt the summer air grow heavy around her, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The three figures stood perfectly still, their bodies shimmering in the strange light, as though made of memory itself. The ground beneath Eliza's feet vibrated softly, a steady pulse in rhythm with the golden halo overhead. Osric bowed his head, his voice low. They will not harm you. Eliza wasn't so sure. As she stepped closer, the figures sharpened, resolving into human-like silhouettes. Yet they had no faces, no features. Their skin glowed with shifting patterns, like reflections on water. What are they? She whispered. Manifestations, Osric said. They are what remains of the world's ancient memory, guardians of its resets. They appear at the end of each cycle. Eliza swallowed. How many cycles? Osric hesitated. More than humanity has recorded. More than you would wish to know. The tallest of the figures stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice wasn't a sound, but a sensation, like a vibration behind her eyes. Eliza Marbridge, you have been called. Eliza's breath caught. Called for what? To become the anchor, to carry what must be remembered through the dissolution of all else. Her hands trembled. But I'm no prophet. I'm just a historian. A historian is precisely what the world requires, the figure replied. One who preserves truth. One who does not bend under fear. One who sees the long path of humanity and understands the cost of forgetting. Eliza shook her head. But I don't understand. If everything resets, if people forget the war, won't history simply repeat itself? A second figure stepped forward. Not if the anchor bears the memory and speaks it into the new age. Not as ideology, not as threat, but as wisdom. Osric added softly. The anchor guides without commanding. You become the whisper in the world's ear, the reminder that keeps humanity from straying again. Eliza's voice was barely a breath. But why me? Why not you, Osric? You know everything. Osric's eyes softened. Because I am part of the system, a caretaker of endings. I do not belong to the world that will be reborn, he paused. I am not meant to carry its future. Eliza's heart twisted. She looked up at the shimmering beings. If I say yes, what happens? The third figure raised an arm. The sky brightened. The halo pulsed like a sun. The ground hummed louder. Then the reset begins. Memory will unravel. History will dissolve. The figure pointed toward the horizon. Across London, entire buildings flickered like unstable images on a failing screen. Bridges blurred. The River Thames rippled with distortions, as if reality were loosening around it. People stopped in the streets, staring in confusion as their surroundings wavered. You, and only you, will remember. And if I say no? She whispered. A deep silence settled. Osric answered, barely audible. Then the world collapses. Not resets. Ends. Eliza felt her breath catch in her throat. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, heavier than the whole sweltering summer sky. She closed her eyes. She thought of the woman who forgot her own name. She thought of the nuclear flash she had seen from London's coast, months before, how it painted the horizon white. She thought of the children who would grow up after the reset, never knowing the scars their ancestors carved into the earth. She took a shaky breath. I will do it, she said. The world exhaled. The three figures stepped closer, their forms softening into swirls of gold. They encircled her, raising their hands. Osric bowed deeply, one hand to his chest. Thank you, he whispered. You have saved more than you will ever know. The air filled with a resonant hum, the same metallic note that had shaken the sky 2 days earlier. But now it was gentler, fuller, like a choir of distant bells. The figures touched their hands to Eliza's temples. Lights surged through her. Memories, hers and not hers, flashed like lightning behind her eyes. She saw ages long past, resets long forgotten, worlds built and unbuilt. She felt the terror of destruction and the quiet hope of renewal. Her knees buckled, but the figures held her steady. The golden halo expanded across the sky, stretching over all of London, then beyond. The city dissolved into shimmering particles, buildings